So, the new series of Doctor Who has happened. Following the 60th anniversary specials last year, which served as a sort of epilogue to the 2005 era, and now we've got essentially another reboot. Season 1, a brand new jumping on point for new viewers. Look, it's Doctor Who. This is as good of a jumping on point as you're gonna get. Also, I'm aware that there's a bunch of discourse about whether this is Season 1 or Series 14. I would just like to stress that I do not care. I'm calling it Season 1 for the sake of this video. Yeah, anyway. Ncuti Gatwa takes over as the 15th Doctor, a fresh incarnation who has healed from his past trauma and been given a new lease of life. Accompanied by companion Ruby Sunday, played by Millie Gibson, they travel the universe, encountering danger, mystery, and gay people. Despite having only 8 episodes, this series is filled with ups and downs, action and secrets. But does it deliver? Is this series a return to the golden years? Well, that's what I'm here to discuss. So turn off your Dalton bubble and don't step in any furry circles as we go through Doctor Who Season 1. And if you're just here to complain about wokeness or to say RIP Doctor Who, then here's that attention you want so badly. Now get lost. Also, I'll make this quick, I promise, but my god, my last video popped off. So I just want to quickly say thanks to everyone who watched that. It's been amazing seeing how many people appreciated and enjoyed the video. It was so much fun to work on. So thanks for all the support on it, it really does mean a lot. Also, if you didn't already know, I have a Discord server now, so if you want to join, we hang out and we talk about men and Chibnall bad and stuff, so if you want to join and hang out, link in the description, and yeah, let's just get into it. So, going into this series, I was cautiously optimistic. I absolutely had faith in Russell T Davies as a writer, because I've loved a lot of the stuff he's written since leaving Doctor Who. But also, while I did enjoy the 60th anniversary specials, I felt like there were some issues with the pacing and the hand-wavy explanations for things happening that left me with some reservations. Also, the fact that there were only 8 episodes in this series is a bit disappointing. Not only that, but only 2 of these episodes aren't written by Russell T Davies. But I was still excited regardless, and I was confident Ncuti would give a great performance. But did the series hold up? Well, let's find out. The series begins with Space Babies, which I would consider the weakest episode of the series. I don't think it's bad, but it's definitely the episode I've had the least motivation to rewatch, and the one I have the least to say about. I mean, overall, I love the Doctor's enthusiasm in this episode. Like, he has some great moments, like when he says that everyone is unique, or when he saves the bogeyman. I think the episode also sells the Doctor and Ruby's friendship quite easily. Like, they've got some good chemistry. There are also a couple of scenes that remind me of The End of the World and The Beast Below. First, there's the scene where Ruby calls Carla. Obviously, it is quite similar to the scene in The End of the World. You know, there's only so many ways you can have the companion gain the ability to ring their mum while in the future. But this scene in Space Babies sort of feels like it's just there to be there. In The End of the World, the scene of Rose ringing her mum comes during a bit of downtime in the episode. Rose was understandably frustrated with the Doctor at this point. He's just shown up, taken her to the future without explaining who he is, and surrounded her with loads of aliens. She's overwhelmed, and the Doctor finally takes her feelings into consideration and gives her the ability to phone her mum. It's significant because it shows how this Doctor is sort of disconnected from human emotions, having just recently come out of the Time War, only for both of them to work past their differences, acknowledge each other's feelings, and strengthen their friendship. Here, it's just kind of, yep, she rang her mum. It's not bad, I just don't get the feeling this scene had any real impact on the episode or the Doctor and Ruby's friendship. There's also the scene where the Doctor saves the bogeyman, which reminds me of The Beast Below. Except this episode actually handles this aspect in a way that's different, but still impactful. In The Beast Below, the Doctor finds out that Starship UK is able to travel across space due to a star whale, the last of its kind, which was imprisoned and tortured. The Doctor doesn't think he can free it without killing everyone on the ship, so opts to essentially murder the star whale as painlessly as he can, relieving it of its pain but leaving it brain dead. But Amy sees the bigger picture and manages to free the star whale from its torture without destroying the ship, because it turns out the whale wanted to help anyway. You could see Space Babies as a continuation of that plot point, and a representation of how the Doctor has changed since then, and specifically how 15 will handle these situations with a lot more compassion and consideration than his predecessors might. You know, they were all bogged down by guilt and trauma, often seeing things way more pessimistically. But the 15th Doctor is free from all that. He's learned to see things in a different way, and I think it's a good showcase of the attitude of this new Doctor. Also, this episode is stupid because the space station uses farts to move. That's very immature and not poggers. Yeah, because God forbid the first series of a new era of Doctor Who uses fart jokes. Never happened before, am I right? Anyway, the VFX of the babies, space babies, when they talk, questionable? I'm sure the effect with the mouths was hard to do, but it does look kinda rough. It reminds me of, there's this guy who dubs movie scenes, but with a Liverpool accent, and the effects there are unironically more convincing than the effects in Space Babies.
Let's go, it's Sunday, the Asda shuts at 4:30.
But yeah, that's about all I have to say on Space Babies. It's a relatively simple and inoffensive story, with some decent comedy. It's pretty much what you'd expect from an RTD series opener. But with the rest of the series being hard-hitting, experimental episodes, it does seem slightly out of place as a statement of intent, but I don't know, I don't really have any strong opinions about it. It's Space Babies. The Devil's Chord was made for me specifically. Okay, I understand why this episode may not be for everyone, but personally, as someone who loves music and someone who loves theatre, a musical theatre episode of Doctor Who is something I've wanted for a long time. This is another episode that completely bends the rules of the universe. It's all about gods, the power of music, and the Beatles. Okay, not all about them. In this episode, a guy plays a tritone, and it summons a demon. Hang on a second. I like how Maestro begins the opening titles by playing the piano. I just kind of wish it carried on all the way through. You know, like the electric guitar remix in Before the Flood. The highlight of this episode is easily the villain of Maestro, played by Jinx Monsoon. I can't say I was really familiar with her previous work, but goddamn, I did not expect a performance that engaging. She pulls off a perfect balance of camp and threatening, managing to be over the top without coming off as cartoonishly evil. I really get the feeling that Maestro is an evil theatrical god who thrives on chaos, and they still manage to come off as a proper threat. And you can feel the fear the Doctor has as soon as he hears the giggle, knowing how impossible this fight is going to be. Maestro truly steals the show in every scene they're in, commanding the episode, both literally and metaphorically. Something I think this episode also does really well is comedy. Like the scenes of the Beatles and Cilla Black singing the average mainstream pop song in 2024, as well as the sloppy playing of the orchestra, were really funny to me. And
I thought that was non-diegetic.
Was unironically the most I've laughed watching Doctor Who. The visuals are also really creative and cool. I like the scene with Maestro surrounded by sheet music, looking like Dr. Octopus, and the scene where Ruby is trapped and she starts singing a mysterious song before Carol of the Bells starts playing as Maestro backs away in fear is really cool. This scene had so much power and intrigue to it. Keyword had. Also, the scene where the Doctor first encounters Maestro and diverts them by muting all the nearby sound is brilliantly tense. The music battle at the end was also really cool. And I'd argue the most fitting and least anticlimactic method the Doctor uses in this series to fight a god. Oh, and by the way, Ruby is very musically talented. Seriously, not only can she compose a really well-made piece and has a good sense of tempo, but she can also improvise incredibly well while facing away from the piano. Seriously, get her on the X Factor. She's got the sob story and all. As for the Beatles, yeah, there's no denying they felt a little underutilized, especially since a lot of this episode's marketing revolved around them. And I know they don't look a lot like the actual Beatles, John Lennon's glasses were inaccurate for the time, and the Beatles didn't actually know much music theory, and Paul couldn't even read sheet music. So the idea of them just seeing these notes and knowing exactly what to play does seem a bit strange. But you could argue John wearing the wrong glasses represents how he's moved on with his career a lot quicker in this timeline. And since music is shown in this episode to be a powerful thing that can influence the mind, John and Paul may have just felt an instinct to play the right notes and chord here. As for the ending song, It unironically goes hard. I don't care. This is exactly what I expect from an out there musical episode of Doctor Who, and just one of the many reasons why I love this episode. As a whole, it just perfectly encapsulates what I expected from this era. Something fresh and wacky that takes its experimental concepts and runs with them. And yeah, I know there are some moments which seem random given how the Doctor and Ruby have barely travelled together at this point, and a lot of people have pointed out how it doesn't feel like it should be episode 2. I'll come back to this later. But yeah, once again, I understand why the Devil's Chord may not be for everyone, and that's why this is my episode now. It's mine. All for me. So overall, this series has had a pretty good start so far. What better way to top this than to bring back the GOAT himself? Yeah, for episode 3, former showrunner Stephen Moffat returns, and proves once again why he's my favourite Doctor Who writer. Honestly, I'm just so glad we got him back for the new series, and the fact that the episode he wrote happens to be my favourite is just a bonus. In Boom, the Doctor steps on a landmine and can't move. Since the physical space they had to film in was very restricted, a lot of this episode's identity relies on its dialogue, which is awesome. Stephen Moffat just gets how to write for the show like no one else. There are so many great lines in this episode.
Everywhere's a beach eventually. Okay, it's exactly 6.732217 kilograms. I was trying not to show off.
Blind isn't fatal.
You literally just said that to a dead blind guy.
The storytelling is on point throughout the episode as well. Like, everything flows so smoothly, and there's a great sense of cause to effect rather than things just happening one after the other. Ncuti really shines as the Doctor in this episode, which is a testament to how good he is, because he literally can't move for most of this episode. His performance is so restricted, and yet he still absolutely kills it. He gives off a major Peter Capaldi vibe here, with lines like the beach line and
Shut up and Google.
Google it.
Ruby is also great here. I've seen people say she basically becomes Clara in this episode, and I get that, but I feel like she's always had a Clara vibe to her. Like, look at this bit from the church on Ruby Road and tell me she doesn't feel incredibly Clara-pilled.
Did you just hiss at me? Was that a hiss?
You know, while working on this video, I watched that new show by Moffat, Douglas Has Cancelled, and it's very jarring going from the solid writing of 19-year-old Ruby in Boom to the almost caricature-esque writing of 19-year-old Claudia in that series. The world building is on point from the start, establishing the location and threat immediately. I love how there are so many things just in the pre-title sequence that really hook you in. Like, why are the soldiers scared of an ambulance? These soldiers can't even see the enemy they're fighting? It wastes no time in setting up the mystery and showing the audience what the consequences are for the Doctor and Ruby if they mess up. And there's just something about this shot, zooming in on the TARDIS as we hear the screams of a dying person as the Doctor runs onto the scene, that just gets me so hyped. It's just such a good way to introduce the Doctor into the episode. Boom is tense, to say the least. Doctor Who has had episodes filled with horror and stress, but I can't think of another time where the show has used the edge-of-your-seat tension in the way this episode does. The editing is perfect. Like, there's always a claustrophobic atmosphere as well as an underlying tension that gets exacerbated at certain points. Oh, and also, this made my jaw drop. I don't know why it's a Stephen Moffat episode. Of course the companion is gonna die. But God, it works so well. The build-up, how it all comes down to a completely reasonable misunderstanding, how the Doctor can't even go over to Ruby, he can't even let this stress him out, because if his blood pressure gets too high, the landmine will go off. It's so impactful. A concern that was apparently tossed around during the production of this episode was whether the Doctor was being portrayed as too weak and helpless, like when he's begging for help as the ambulance approaches him. But that's the point. So much of this tension comes down to the fact that the usually energetic and active Doctor has been grounded to a halt, and left more or less completely immobile. It sells the stakes of the episode, and we still get the observation and heroism of the Doctor throughout the episode. And then the snow begins to fall, as the ambulance struggles to find anyone related to Ruby. If, like in The Devil's Chord, you view this scene in a vacuum, it's very powerful. Like I said, the ambulance can't find anyone in Ruby's family, which, believe me, I will come back to later, and the Doctor keeps holding on to the little hope he has left. Whatever this is, it's clearly part of a bigger narrative. Something powerful enough to scare literal gods. And it seems like something magical might happen. But then...
While there's snow, there's hope.
My vital signs failing.
The episode also contains commentary on several things, some more prominent than others. There are, of course, the classic sci-fi messages of capitalism bad, and war bad, and Chibnall bad, but there's also stuff about the rise of AI and the dystopian attributes it could very easily bring. The dead soldiers get reconstructed into AI holograms that are shells of their former selves. It's pretty twisted seeing how this guy, John Francis Vader, was begging for his life, only for his AI ghost to claim him.
I was humanely terminated.
This isn't even a far-fetched concept. Digital recreations of dead people are already a thing. There's also the criticism of people who act violently in the name of their religion, how they're too quick to act in their faith that they fail to consider the bigger picture, or what they're actually doing, not even realizing there's no enemy to fight. People say it's weird for the Doctor to criticize faith the way he does in this episode, but think about the context here. He's a ticking time bomb, his friend has just died right in front of him, and the soldiers can't even see this has all happened because of an imaginary enemy. And it's only when the Doctor tries to convince them there's no enemy that they suddenly require proof. His criticism of their blind faith is justified. The episode also criticizes the almost robotic attitudes to death in society, taking the common phrase of
Thoughts and prayers.
And twisting it into a malicious omen of death. Moffat has done this sort of thing before in Dark Water, discussing how people handle these topics, just saying the most typical things. And on that note, there are plenty of references to Moffat's other episodes here, but it doesn't come off as nostalgia baiting or anything. They're mostly just little things that make you do the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV meme. Like Villain God, a weapons manufacturer which was referenced in Moffat's first and final stories before Boom. And then there's the poem the Doctor recites when trying to calm himself. The poem ends with,
She replied, "Young man, don't you know there's more to life than the moon and the president's wife?"
a reference to The Magician's Apprentice, where Missy says she's been the Doctor's best friend.
Since the night he stole the moon and the president's wife.
There's a lot that's left deliberately unanswered here, but the interpretation I got was that the Doctor decided to calm himself by reminding himself of one of the few times where he and the Master were close friends, and the poem in question was created by the Shobogans. Now, if you've seen this video, you know how much I adore Missy, so I love this. The set design is also really cool. Like they made this full-on base camp just for us to only see a portion of it in the first minute of the episode. Like, that's dedication. Boom is just awesome. Stephen Moffat proves once again why he is just the best, giving us a brilliant episode that brings the fast-paced nature of 15-0 so far to a complete halt, focusing on the characters and the tension created from this extremely stressful situation. The pacing is great, the dialogue and editing are fantastic. It never fails to leave me on the edge of my seat, no matter how many times I rewatch it. And it's easily my favourite episode of the series. I just love it. Not gonna lie, this Stephen Moffat guy has some real potential as a writer. Maybe he could become showrunner one day. Episode 4 is 73 yards. I know a lot of people consider this the best episode of the season, and while I'm not in that camp myself, I can't deny that this is a very unique and engaging episode. Honestly, I don't know what to make of it. The Doctor hardly appears in this episode, or the one following it, because Ncuti Gatwa was busy filming the final season of Sex Education. Not the only thing he's been part of with a disappointing finale. The Doctor steps on a fairy circle, and completely disappears. And on top of that, a woman suddenly appears, always 73 yards away from Ruby. Semper distans, if you will. And if anyone goes near the woman, she tells them about Ruby's tweets from 10 years ago or something, and they run away in fear. This era has already been filled with superstition and the supernatural going back to Wild Blue Yonder, but the results were still tangible enemies. This is something else though, and it's something that never gets properly explained. I know some people don't like the vagueness of this episode, but I love it as someone who loves theorizing about things and connecting the dots. So yeah, a lot of what I have to say about this episode will probably come down to how I interpreted it, as well as some other interpretations I saw online. As people have already pointed out, the woman that follows Ruby represents her fear of abandonment, making everyone, even her adopted mum, abandon and resent her. I do wonder what happened to the Doctor though. I mean, according to Celtic mythology, anyone who disrupts the fairy circle is made to dance in the ring until they pass out. There are other claims that they simply make you invisible or trap you within the circle forever. Seeing as the circle created a manifestation of Ruby's biggest fear, perhaps it did the same to the Doctor. And I know Time of the Doctor claims the crack in time was his biggest fear, but nah. I think the idea that he got taken to an eternal torment with his biggest fear is an interesting and terrifying concept. But then again, Ruby seems to have fleeting memories of this aborted timeline, but the Doctor doesn't, so maybe not. But whatever this fairy circle is, it's powerful enough to suspend the entire timeline, stopping Sutek's return, and possibly enough to scare him away, depending on how all the Susan clones worked. I'll be honest, my main problem with this episode is probably the pub scene. It just feels kinda out of place, like the episode is trying too hard to be mysterious or subvert your expectations. But you know, credit where it's due, these people are really good LARPers.
Can I pay on my phone?
Yes, you can pay with your phone.
I really don't get why she took so much offense to that question. Like, that's not an unreasonable thing to ask in 2024. Maybe if she asked if they had Sky TV or something.
I don't suppose... Have you got...
Sky TV.
You what?
I mean, this is definitely my northerner showing. I know this is mainly a thing in the north, but a lot of places where I live don't even take card payments. But yeah, that aside, the whole thing about them playing a prank on Ruby and assuring her there's no superstition seems random. Like the episode is trying to distract you from the fact that there's clearly something paranormal going on here. I don't know. Eventually, Ruby discovers Roger Ap William, the last person the Doctor spoke about before vanishing, and her immediate first impression of him is that he wants to nuke the world. And people still vote for him. Top marks for realism, Russell. Like, unironically. Now, the Doctor says in Empire of Death that he was there for the downfall of Roger in 2046, but clearly he wasn't in this episode. Kate also claims that the entire timeline is suspended on the event of Ruby's curse, and we see that there aren't any alien invasions or anything for the rest of Ruby's life. So my theory is that any episode of the show that's set after 2024 just didn't happen. The curse was powerful enough to stop Sutek from manifesting, powerful enough to stop whatever Mrs. Flood had planned, and powerful enough to stop the Doctor ever traveling to the future. Not that they missed much, but the only threat that remained was Roger Ap William. But why? He calls himself Mad Jack at one point, but is that just a coincidence? Or was the circle a warning? A harbinger, perhaps? Now this is where I can't be too certain. But with the way Anurin Barnard spoke about playing the role, I sorta get the vibe he'll have more of a role in the future, rather than just the last third of an episode and 1 minute in the finale. I hope so, because there's a lot of intrigue around him that could be explored a little more. Anyway, Ruby finally realizes what she has to do. This curse has fulfilled her worst nightmare, her whole life being dictated by the personification of her biggest lifelong fear. But she moves on, learns to embrace this one constant, and uses it to do good, stopping Roger before he can launch any nukes.
I'm sorry it took so long, but I wish I could have helped you. I'm so sorry.
God, RTD is so good at insinuating things that make you shiver. Oh, quick side note, Ruby doesn't look like she aged here. Isn't Jackie meant to be, 20 here? Doctor Who has never been the best at aging prosthetics. How is this a surprise to you? I love the idea of Sutek just chilling here, well, this didn't go to plan. And oh my god, this moment. And yeah, Ruby gets the opportunity to undo everything. Whether this was her reward for stopping Roger, or whether she was destined to take a different path, I don't know. But I don't think the fact that Roger is still out there is a plot hole like some people have claimed. Even if he doesn't appear in the show again, the Doctor was still there at his downfall. But yeah, 73 yards is great. I love how so much is left open to interpretation. I get why that may be frustrating to some people, but I think it's done well here. It's a unique episode that really gets you thinking, and it's a great use of the supernatural themes of this era. Okay, like seemingly everyone else, I wasn't too confident in Dot and Bubble initially. I thought it was just gonna be a typical boomer complains about social media for 45 minutes, but my god, I did not expect that. So, to sum this episode up, we stand this poll. But yeah, this episode is set in fine time, with people such as Lindy Pepperbean, Ricky September, Harry Tendency, and Hoochie Pie. So everyone's named like they're in Toast of London.
Kay Tightneck, Cockaboo, Peanut Whistle, Una Length, Dick Weirdley, Sal Commotion, Scott Chestnut, Basil Watchfair, Iqbal Achieve, Nan Slack, Giuseppe Race, even Heathcote Pursuit!
And of course, you've got the only canon Doctor ever, Dr. P. Now, a lot of people falsely assume this episode is a critique on Gen Z and social media. Even the Wikipedia page about the episode gets it wrong. But no, it's a commentary on echo chambers. The residents of Finetime are so engrossed in their bubbles, not caring to actually embrace the real world, and harbouring incredibly toxic views because of their lack of proper education. And this sort of mentality exists in all generations, regardless of where you stand politically. Look at all them anti-woke reactionaries you see online, for example. And outside of the internet, people get brainwashed by the Daily Mail or GB News.
People call me the wokest man in Britain, and I say, please, don't assume my gender.
Oh, well done.
Or whatever shit Nigel Farage is spewing this week.
Happy birthday, huge anus.
I know I'm focusing on right-wing echo chambers here, but this problem exists on the left as well, with Twitter in particular being filled with virtue signalers who are actually very toxic in their own way, just like the people of Finetime, preaching tolerance and positivity while holding a lot of toxic views themselves. The big twist in this episode is that the town is full of white supremacists. And yeah, it does genuinely come as a surprise on first viewing. Thing is, there are plenty of clues throughout the episode, with Lindy dropping some weird lines.
I thought that you just looked the same, but I know this is wrong. When this is over, he is going to be so disciplined. I can't wait.
I did pick up on them, and given how Lindy was seemingly made to be intentionally unlikable, I was expecting some big revelation at the end. But God, it hits. The thing is, even though I sensed something was off, I didn't properly pick up on the racist undertones throughout the episode, and yeah, that's white privilege. Which once again is the episode's way of showing that no matter where you stand socially and politically, you can still have your blind spots while meaning well. Doctor Who has done racism is bad before, but Dot and Bubble takes a different path, instead saying racism is stupid. Because these people are not going to survive out in the wild. They can barely walk on their own, and they refused the one chance they had at survival because they couldn't look past their own prejudice. Once again, it's a realistic commentary. There are people out there who willingly make their lives worse, boycotting entire companies or refusing to watch or actively engage in media, all because they're so stuck in their own self-righteousness and hatred towards marginalized groups. These characters become so perfectly hateable at the end. And the music that swells here makes this a really hard-hitting moment. With Ncuti Gatwa being the first non-white full-time Doctor, it was only a matter of time before he faced racism in an episode. You'd assume it'd happen in an episode set in the past, like 13 in The Witchfinders, but this episode does it in the future. And it's harrowing how little things have changed for some parts of the human race after so many years. Ricky September mentions an abrogation that happened in the past, which could very well be when these attitudes became dominant in Finetime. Speaking of Ricky September, we stan him. And the poll. People say he was probably racist like the rest of them, but I wouldn't be so sure. Ricky genuinely had a desire to learn, to leave the echo chamber and research the history of Finetime and the human race. That, and he didn't show any real disgust when seeing the Doctor, as opposed to Lindy. Ricky is portrayed as a doctor-like figure in this episode, and Lindy tags along with him, no questions asked, showing how she would join the Doctor had she not watched one too many Bolstrek videos. But yeah, Dot and Bubble is fantastic. It contains some great commentary that's woven into the episode really well, with hints towards the twist that are just the right amount of subtle. The episode also does a great job of making Lindy just unlikable enough that the revelation at the end comes as a shock, while still making sense. The ending as a whole is just so good. It's crazy that this was Ncuti's first proper time filming for the show outside of the giggle. It's performed so well. I love this episode.
I cheered, I shouted, I fist pumped the air, I cried, I stood and cheered. I'm so proud to be in it.
Okay, to sum up episode 6, I think I'm unironically in love with Rogue. both the episode and the character. So in this episode, we're introduced to the titular bounty hunter Rogue, a very Captain Jack and Han Solo type character. But he manages to be his own thing without just feeling like a rehash of either of those characters. People say his relationship with the Doctor feels forced and rushed, but I disagree. I really liked how things developed. I got the sense these two were sharing a great bond, and Rogue's sacrifice at the end genuinely got to me. I think Rogue is the most interesting side character we've had in God knows how long. It feels so refreshing, essentially having a team of 3 for an episode. The majority of my favourite TARDIS teams are trios, and I really wish Rogue stuck around. Still, with Varada Setu joining the Doctor in Season 2, it seems like we will be getting a trio for at least some of the next season. Still, bring back Rogue anyway, please, Russell. Thank you. All the interactions between the Doctor and Rogue are just so good. Like, how can anyone watch this scene and say their chemistry was forced?
Did you get your name from Dungeons and Dragons?
Roll for insight.
I'm sorry, was that a wee smile? I'm the most serious man in history.
All the little back and forths and remarks easily sell the idea that these two immediately feel a connection with one another.
That's my ship.
You travel in a shed?
Love the shed.
Why isn't it cloaked?
It's behind a tree.
It says you're hot.
Does it? I'm sorry, no, it's broken.
I'm in love with this machine.
Rogue acts all secluded and unfazed because he lost his partner, but now he's met someone who matches his freak. And my god, the dance scene. I love everything about this. How everything goes dark, looking like there's a spotlight on the Doctor and Rogue, as they're suddenly the center of attention. How it also represents how they're just so focused on each other, the camera not showing anyone else until the lights come back on. It's just so good. And then Rogue gets down on one knee and hands the Doctor a ring. And even though this is all an act, you can see the Doctor genuinely consider it before remembering everyone he lost. It's just such a great scene. And then, at the end, the Doctor is stuck with an impossible choice. He can get rid of the Chord and save the world, but lose Ruby in the process. But Rogue, knowing what it's like to lose the person closest to you, sacrifices himself. Perhaps I'm just a little fruity, but this is really emotional, and I think the episode built up to it perfectly. Russell, you better bring him back, or I swear to God. Anyway, as you've probably worked out, Rogue is my favourite part of Rogue, but the rest of it is really enjoyable too. The episode is largely based on Bridgerton, but it manages to make that inspiration part of the plot, if that makes sense. These shape-shifting birds called Chord have watched Bridgerton and gone back to Regency England to cosplay and LARP as if they're in the show. I like the Chord. They've got a perfect childish recklessness to them while still being portrayed as a proper threat. Their lines like,
I want to be the Doctor. Who wants to fight for the other one?
are almost identical to conversations I had on the school playground back in the day. The Tesselector antibodies from Let's Kill Hitler were a personal favourite when it came to playing monsters. I've not watched all of Bridgerton. It's on my ever-growing list of shows and movies to watch, but there were some references I liked, such as the violins playing modern music like Bad Guy, or when Pokerface plays as Ruby fights the Chord. Speaking of which, I know the whole battle mode thing was pretty predictable, but come on, surely you've heard of the classic narrative principle, Chekhov's earring. Doctor Who has never borrowed from other media this much? Yeah, I know, right? Crazy. I also like the way the Susan Twist mystery is handled in this episode. Her appearances had been getting more prominent throughout the season, with the Doctor and Ruby starting to acknowledge her, but this time, it feels a lot more reserved and ominous, perfect for a final reminder of the mystery just before the finale. I just find Rogue a really enjoyable and engaging episode. Boom is my favourite episode of the season, but Rogue is a very close second. I've just realised my 2 favourite episodes this season were the only 2 not written by Russell T Davies. Now, a lot of people have said this series feels like the episodes are out of order, and I agree. I think the Devil's Chord and Rogue were originally supposed to be swapped around in the series order. I mean, in Rogue, when Ruby is recounting all her adventures to prove to the Doctor that it's really her, she stops at Space Babies, and that flashback of Carla asking if the Doctor will keep Ruby safe would also seem less random if it immediately followed the ending of Space Babies. And with the Devil's Chord, the Doctor says Ruby is from June or July 2024, and we're expected to believe the Doctor and Ruby travelled together for 6 months after Space Babies, and he never took her to an alien planet until the following episodes. Also,
one who waits is almost here!
This seems like odd foreshadowing to give 2 episodes in. That's definitely the kind of line you drop an episode or 2 before the series finale. Same with the mention of Susan. If I had to guess, I'd say they were swapped because The Devil's Chord aired on the day of Eurovision, as well as that Beatles documentary coming out on Disney Plus at around the same time, and Rogue would fit well into Pride Month, I suppose. But yeah, I really love Rogue. Both the character and the episode. He'll be back. He better be back. Rogue, please.
When you're gone, I'll go mad. So don't throw away this thing we have.
Oh boy. The series finale. As I'm sure you know, there is a lot to talk about here. Honestly, I thought about making a separate video about the finale, but nah. Now, I didn't actually watch The Legend of Ruby Sunday when it first aired. If you didn't know, they were playing The Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death in a bunch of cinemas across the UK. So I decided to wait and touch grass for a week. Was it worth it? Yes, you should all touch grass. After finishing this video, of course. The Legend of Ruby Sunday is actually a really good opener to the finale, though it is almost entirely just set up for Empire of Death, which does kinda hurt it in the long run. Like, Last of the Time Lords was a pretty underwhelming end to Series 3, but that doesn't stop Utopia from being one of my favourite episodes of all time, because it sets up the finale while telling a great story on its own. So, the Doctor has finally decided to investigate the mystery of Susan Twist appearing everywhere, as well as the mystery of Ruby's birth mother.
Susan is the name of my granddaughter.
Oh, it's not like there's anyone else out there called Susan. Yes, but how many Susans have followed the Doctor across all his adventures and established a company named after an anagram of TARDIS? It's not an unreasonable assumption for him to make. Though I think the fact this feels a little jarring is yet more proof that The Devil's Chord should have been episode 6, since the Doctor mentions Susan then.
But he never, ever mentioned a granddaughter.
Okay, but why was there a picture of Susan in the Black Archive if Kate doesn't know her? Guess she must have had her memories erased. Something I do love here is how the Doctor really makes an effort to greet everyone at UNIT, including the people he's never met. It's a nice contrast from how a lot of previous Doctors weren't super interested in anyone but the higher-ups, or in some cases made his dislike towards UNIT very apparent. Except for Ross. We like Ross. I really like the scene in the time window. In a vacuum, this is really creepy and intriguing. As soon as Colonel Chidozi went behind the TARDIS, I was like, yep, he's dead. Honestly, my nerves were already shot by this point, and then they dropped the most horrific, stomach-churning line possible. Like, this is a family show, Russell, Jesus. I'll be honest, Carla suddenly deciding to go to UNIT felt a little forced. Like the show needed some reason to get Mrs. Flood into the episode. And while we're talking about Mrs. Flood, I don't care if you can sense the end of the world. Get Cherry her cup of tea. Now, the Susan Triad mystery was great. It was really cool seeing her appear over and over as the Doctor and Ruby become more aware of her. But I really like the mystery of the TARDIS groaning. It had happened a few times, and it wasn't something I'd really thought about. I mean, I noticed the noises, but it never occurred to me that it might be part of some bigger mystery. And I love that. It was a perfectly subtle mystery that barely anyone even acknowledged until the Doctor Who Twitter made a post about it right before the episode aired. It's really cool having a subtle mystery that gets overshadowed by the bigger mystery of Susan. And I hope we get more stuff like this. I love everything in this episode from when the dust cloud appears. The tension keeps building, and it's really well done.
Do you dream about being an ambulance?
I will unironically be using this the next time I go on a date. It's really unsettling seeing Susan being guided and whispered to by a secret voice. All these Susans are real people with their own memories and minds, so the idea of them all being puppets of Sutekh is more sad than anything.
There is the Mara, the god of beasts.
Oh my god. The Mara got a mention. Big day for virgins. But yeah, seriously, Harriet Arbinger's ominous speech listing off all the gods had me on the edge of my seat. The tension builds in such a perfect way, and my jaw dropped when Sutekh's name appeared. Also, the Trickster got a mention. Russell, you better bring him back now. And while I'm on the topic of gods, the Mara is the god of beasts. I mean, I can see the Mara being part of the pantheon. It does operate in a similar way to the other gods in the list. But wouldn't the God of Dreams or the God of Illusions work better? But regardless, I'm loving the whole supernatural theme of this era so far, and I hope we see some of the gods listed here in future. Especially the Trickster. And the Mara. Anyway, back to the reveal. Even though I had already suspected Sutekh was returning, it was still enough to make me audibly gasp. Had I not been in the cinema, I probably would have screamed. Because, my god, say what you want about Russell, he still knows how to do an amazing cliffhanger. The imagery of Susan after she's been corrupted by Sutekh is super creepy too. The ending really reminded me of episodes like The Impossible Planet and Army of Ghosts. And it helps that the voice of Sutekh was also the voice of the Beast. Even if you didn't know who Sutekh was before this, the episode does a good job of establishing him as a very big threat. You know, the god of death and all that. The Legend of Ruby Sunday is a really great opening to a finale. I mean, I'm fully aware that it's almost entirely set up, but it still hooks me all the way through. I love the mystery, the tension, the emotion, the build-up. It just does its job very well. Something that I think has been lacking in Doctor Who for a while is proper edge-of-your-seat tension, and I think Boom and this episode bring that vibe back magnificently. Now, you may be wondering, with a setup and cliffhanger that good, what would be the best way to drop the ball so incredibly hard you damage the reputation of your era and ruin many people's investment in future seasons? I went into Empire of Death really wanting to like it. I was really excited. And so was everyone else who travelled out to the cinema at midnight to watch Doctor Who. But by the end, you could just feel how deflated the atmosphere was. The general reaction to this episode has been really bad, and it seems like it's diminished a lot of people's investment in the story going forward. But why? What makes Empire of Death such an unsatisfying finale? I'll tell you. Okay, in all fairness, Empire of Death starts out pretty strong. Pretty much all the side characters get wiped out immediately. This ruins the stakes because it's obvious they're all gonna survive. Guess what? I don't care. The whole point of this episode is the entire universe gets wiped out. They might as well show the personal effects while they're at it. Though I think it would have been cool if we saw other characters from the season getting dusted, like Mundy and Splice, or the Beatles, or the babies, space babies. Although, it may be a bit extreme showing an army of literal infants getting reduced to dust. Then we get the big reveal. Sutekh has clung to the Doctor's TARDIS since being defeated in Pyramids of Mars. I'm sorry, but I cannot take this seriously. I mean, I can accept it, mainly because of all the memes that have spawned from it. So, Sutekh was just chilling on the TARDIS for, well, presumably over 3,000 years at this point. So, like, was he just vibing throughout the Time War? Or when the TARDIS was about to die in Journey's End? Or when it literally blew up and continued exploding for nearly 2,000 years afterwards? Or when House possessed it? Or the aborted timeline in Name of the Doctor? Or when it shrank in Flatline? What about Fear Her? Was the Isolus powerful enough to trap fucking Sutekh? So instead, my headcanon is that the introduction of the supernatural in Wild Blue Yonder allowed Sutekh to return and evolve, and perhaps aided by the walls of the universe being weakened by the flux, was able to latch onto the Doctor's TARDIS and use his new evolved godlike powers to manipulate the TARDIS throughout its entire history. This does open up some more questions though. So other gods like the Toymaker and Maestro could see Sutekh and feared him. Yet Maestro has no reaction to the TARDIS, despite Sutekh apparently being right there. And they have a reaction to Carol of the Bells, because Sutekh can't have been there. Anyway, Sutekh gets all his Susans that he created to do the Cinnamon Challenge, and wipe out all life on every planet the Doctor has ever been to. I do wonder how it worked with that portrait of her in Rogue. Did it just come alive like that Sarah Jane Adventures episode? This is the info we need, Russell. So we see all life turn to dust, and Ncuti's performance here is incredible. There are plenty of good moments in this episode, like when the Doctor finds that woman who can't remember anything, realizing her baby died and she forgot. It's disturbing and very sad. After this, though, is when things get... So, the reason why Sutekh chose now of all times to return is because he doesn't know who Ruby's mum is. We'll come back to this. But the remembered TARDIS also shows the key to solving the mystery. A deleted scene from 73 Yards, where Roger Ap Gwilliam proposes compulsory DNA testing for the entire UK population. You can't even explain this as alternate timelines, since this was before Roger was elected and subsequently defeated in different ways in each timeline. So that's the key. They travel to 2046 and find the identity of Ruby's mother through DNA. Ruby is about to show him the name of her mum, but drops the tablet on the ground. I mean, sure, but I think this moment could have been more impactful had Ruby not actually seen who her mother is. But at this point, she knows, so there's a lack of impact and sacrifice here. Not only that, but Sutekh can read minds, and then Sutekh, the god of gods, an immensely powerful entity of death, does nothing while a lead is attached to him. Oh no, sorry, he gets his assistant to walk slowly towards the Doctor and Ruby, instead of, unfastening the lead, or using their dust. And the Doctor defeats Sutekh by taking him walkies through all of time, undoing all the death he's done. The Doctor has a good speech here, and 15's theme feels like it was made specifically for this kind of scene, but I struggle to take it seriously. I know everyone and their hooded mysterious mother has made a live-action Scooby-Doo joke, so I won't, but live-action Scooby-Doo. Okay, it's time for the main problem with this finale. Ruby's mum. So, the big surprise reveal is that Ruby's mum is no one. She's just an ordinary woman. I want to like this, but there are so many problems here. Firstly, what was stopping Sutekh from knowing who she is? Please, someone explain to me what was stopping this god of all gods from just fucking knowing who this woman is. And that aside, why does he even care? It was established in Pyramids of Mars that Sutekh had no interest in anyone, not even the Time Lords. He just considered all life his enemy and wanted to destroy it all. The whole grand reveal thing at the end of the first part did seem a little unlike the Sutekh we knew in Pyramids, but I let it slide because it worked so well. But this is not Sutekh. So, Ruby's mum is just an ordinary woman. But that doesn't explain why she was so mysterious. Why the video kept glitching whenever anyone almost saw her face. Why the memory of her pointing changed for the Doctor. Why it kept snowing everywhere Ruby went. Oh wait, no. Apparently the reason that night was so powerful was because Sutekh was there. And because he didn't know who Ruby's mum was, that made that night a powerful moment in time. What? I've already said how that is just not Sutekh at all, but beyond that, that literally does not explain any of the plot holes I just mentioned. Also, I'm gonna return to the next of kin scene in Boom here. Why did the Villain Guard algorithm not know Ruby's family if her mum was just ordinary? And also, how was Davina McCall's crew not able to find any family members? Seriously, there are stories going back to the 60s of people finding their long-lost family, with less technology and less info to go off than Davina McCall had here. Her mum works for the NHS, for God's sake. Are you telling me there wasn't any records? Failing that, does she not have any other family members, however distant, who have any medical records out there at all? It just seems so far-fetched, I can't take it seriously. The message is that Ruby's mum was only special because we believed she was special. Russell basically says that we're wrong and stupid for believing she was important, but my brother in Christ, you made her important. You explicitly told us several times throughout this season that this mystery was important. Like, of course we're going to invest into it and theorize about it. If the mystery of Ruby's mum was some vague thing that wasn't focused on, fair enough. But this is the main fucking mystery of the series. If you straight up tell us we're wrong for paying attention to the text of the mystery you wrote, why should we invest in any future mysteries you put out? And that's the main long-term problem I think will stem from this finale. Why should we care? I've been seeing this question pretty much everywhere, and I agree with the sentiment. Why should we invest ourselves and have fun theorizing about the mysteries of the show, now that we've been told our guesses don't matter? To be clear, I'm okay with a sudden reveal that no one could have seen coming. I'm okay with red herrings. I mean, the previous episode literally did that with the whole S-Triad stuff, and that worked really well, because it takes the piss out of those who get really invested in the mysteries while still rewarding those people. and providing another twist the writers assumed people wouldn't work out. Red herrings and twists are great, but the important thing about a twist reveal is that you don't fucking punish your viewers for investing themselves in your mystery. I doubt this will happen again, but I completely get why plenty of people feel less inclined to care about any future mysteries, now that there's a very real chance Mrs. Flood could just be some old woman with dementia who occasionally says ominous things, and her big mystery is that she used to be a dinner lady at Ruby's primary school. Now, Ruby will still be in Season 2, so maybe these mysteries will be expanded on then. But if that's the case, fucking tell us. I want to talk about another Doctor Who series finale that leaves several questions open. It's Series 5's The Big Bang. The main mystery of this series is the cracks in time, which have been showing up everywhere. And we find out in the finale that the cracks were caused by the Doctor's TARDIS blowing up, which destroyed the whole of reality. The Doctor fixes everything and seals the crack, but there are still many mysteries left unsolved. Like, okay, so the Doctor's TARDIS blew up, but who did that? And why? And what is the silence? The episode outright acknowledges that these things are yet to be solved.
The TARDIS exploded for a reason. The silence, whatever it is still out there.
The Big Bang serves as a satisfying conclusion to the mystery of the series, while still reminding you that this is just a piece of the overall puzzle, and everything else will be solved in due time. Now, I'm no storytelling expert, but if you have unresolved mysteries that you plan on expanding on in future, there are probably better ways to communicate that to the audience than...
That's how the story of the church on Ruby Road comes to an end.
The problem with Empire of Death is it leaves so many things unsolved, and I don't think the episode is even aware of this. And...
She was pointing out the name of the road.
I'm sorry, but what? This is genuinely the stupidest reveal of the entire episode, and that's saying something. Why was she pointing? Who was going to see that? And once again, why did she not point originally until the Doctor's memory changed? I just can't wrap my head around this. Ruby's storyline was apparently a response to the story of Rey in the recent Star Wars movies. Rey was abandoned by her parents and wants to know who they were, only to be told they were just ordinary people who gave her away. The whole message there is that anyone can be a hero, regardless of where you come from, which is good. It serves as a nice contrast to Anakin and Luke, who were destined to become the powerful warriors they ended up being, for better or for worse. But then, The Rise of Skywalker reveals that Rey is actually Palpatine's granddaughter, which completely defeats the whole message The Last Jedi was trying to push. The story of Ruby was Russell's way of trying to do that story right, but I think he fundamentally misunderstood what made the Rey twist fail in the first place. It worked because we knew basically nothing about her parents. Nothing was contradicted, but it still felt like a logical and satisfying twist, despite how not good The Last Jedi is as a whole. But the twist of Ruby's origin actively contradicts pretty much everything we'd been told and shown throughout the season. The scenes where Ruby finds her mum and leaves the Doctor are really well done. I just struggle to feel anything watching them because the context surrounding them is such a mess. Also...
But she never told him, my mum, my real mum.
Ew. Real mum? That genuinely seems so dismissive towards Carla, like what the fuck? I think I know why this ending feels so unsatisfying and out of left field. That's just how Russell works. There was an interview recently with Anita Dobson, who plays Mrs. Flood, and she talks about how Russell will take a narrative one way and then suddenly do something completely different. It very much seems like he makes a lot of the narratives up as he goes along. I highly doubt he'd even properly decided to bring back Sutekh when writing the foreshadowing from the Toymaker or Maestro. I imagine he did the same thing in his original run of Doctor Who, but things just happened to work a lot better back then. The puzzle pieces ended up fitting together surprisingly well. This time around though, I think the cracks are really starting to show with this storytelling style, and this finale is pretty solid proof that just winging it and hoping things fit together is not a great way of telling a story. So basically, Empire of Death is a mess. I can see what it was going for, but unfortunately it gets bogged down by incredibly massive contradictions and a muddled message that does not fit the narrative that was being conveyed throughout this season. Sutekh is also kind of wasted as a villain. His personality and motivations largely contradict how he behaved in Pyramids of Mars. The episode has some good moments, but unless Season 2 delivers a satisfying conclusion, I could see this finale really affecting the perception of this era in the long run. Russell T Davies is a brilliant writer. I really enjoyed the shows he's written since leaving Doctor Who, like Years and Years and It's a Sin, both phenomenal shows. And he has written some great episodes for this season. But there's no denying he's matured a lot as a writer in recent years. Those shows I just mentioned are pretty good examples of that. And I was really hoping to see elements of that mature writing in this new era. We did see that happen to some degree in 73 Yards and Dot and Bubble, which I'd argue were Russell's best scripts this season. But when it comes to camp family sci-fi, I think he's simply matured past it over the last 15 years, which is fine, but he's still trying to recapture that magic to varying degrees of success. And I don't think that's just the nostalgia bias talking, because Boom and Rogue managed to be absolute modern classics, capturing the essence of what makes Doctor Who so great while still doing their own new thing. I've seen other people say this, but with all the returning actors and crew and the over-reliance on the past, particularly with the finale, it sort of seems like RTD is accepting that the show's best days are behind us, which doesn't have to be the case. Okay, so the finale was a bit of a letdown, but I can't deny that the rest of this series has been really good. Even the weakest episodes like Space Babies and Empire of Death, I wouldn't even consider them really bad or anything, they're just kind of meh, and they have plenty of redeeming qualities. Overall, I'd consider the run of episodes from The Devil's Chord to The Legend of Ruby Sunday to be one of the best runs of episodes in the show's entire history. Genuinely. The series as a whole has just felt so fresh and engaging, and honestly, I find these episodes so rewatchable. And I just cannot understand the people who say that this is one of the worst series ever. Like, I've genuinely seen people say Season 1 is worse than Series 11, and like, no offense, but are you listening to yourself? Now, I'm fully aware Empire of Death was a complete mess, but it is nowhere near the level of the Battle of Ranbu Av. You cannot tell me that episode is better than Empire of Death, I'm sorry. Though something I'd love to see in future seasons is more variety. You know, like I said earlier, 6 of these 8 episodes were written by Russell T Davies. And also, like I said earlier, my 2 favourite episodes from this season were the only 2 not written by Russell T Davies. So more than anything, I'd love to see more variety in terms of writers in future seasons. In particular, I think we need more female and POC writers. Ncuti is just brilliant as the Doctor. As I said, I already had confidence in him. He just feels like the Doctor with a whole other quirky new thing that's going on, and I love it. This new Doctor cries too much. This is actually, not poggers. I love how this critique is never made against Ruby, who also cries in pretty much every episode. But this is the Doctor. He tough, he big man, he strong. Almost like this is the exact kind of toxic masculinity the show is trying to fight against. Crazy, right? But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this new season. Like, I think it's genuinely going to be one of my favourite series of all time. Main improvements I'd like to be made in the future. Firstly, more episodes. 8 is not enough. Like, come on, 10 at least, please. I'd like a bit more downtime with just characters chilling in the TARDIS, developing their relationships and stuff. There's not enough of that sort of thing, I don't think. Like I said, more variety with writers. And please don't punish us for being invested in a mystery in future, please. Thank you. Yeah, other than that, I actually love this series. I will defend it to my last breath. Hopefully a lot of the issues we've had so far are just teething problems, and things will get better as we go on. But genuinely, Season 1 is brilliant. I don't care what anyone says, I love it. And yeah, that's about it. So, in conclusion, stand this poll. Goodbye.